Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to be creating a card using new products from Pretty Pink Posh. I'm going to be using this Camping Friends stamp set. It does have a coordinating die set, but I won't be using that today. I'll be doing a bit of fussy cutting when it comes to those images. I've also sketched out an idea for my card. The card idea does kind of morph and change as it goes along, but I will describe all of those decisions as they come along in the video. So the first thing I did was I cut that shaped hexagon window out of some Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is the 80-pound cardstock. And I'm going to trace that down onto another piece of the same cardstock so that I have an idea of the space that I'm working with. So I'm using a pencil and lightly tracing the inner area of that window that I've die cut. And then I'm going to start doing some stamping. I'm going to have the camping tent in the center of that shape. And then I'm going to have the two animals, I think it's a raccoon and a beaver. I assume it's a beaver because of the size relation to the raccoon, although it could also be a chipmunk, but I don't think a chipmunk would be that large. I think I would be terrified to see a chipmunk as large as a raccoon in the forest. So I'm assuming it's a beaver. So I first stamped the beaver and then I stamped the raccoon right next to it. And I didn't like how far apart they were, so I will go back and stamp that again later, but I'm going to use a different piece of paper that I messed up the stamping on, and I'm going to just stamp some of the other elements for my card. So I have that sign that says missing you, and I've added the missing you. You have other options on what you want the sign to say. And then I also stamped that tent. I'm going to first start coloring the tent, and I'm using Copic markers today, so for some really fast, easy coloring. And I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video process here in a minute, but I will talk you through what I'm doing. So I'm using 3 different colors of yellow, green, or like an olive shade for this. And I'm keeping the lightest areas on the outer and upper areas of the tent. My card idea kind of has a nighttime sky, and so that light would be coming from up above. So the way it would fall on the tent, it would have the area nearest the top edge would be the lightest. So I'm keeping that very light and bright, but I'm also adding some darker areas down near the bottom of the tent. So I'm intensifying all of that dark shading and then coming back in with the lightest color to blend all those colors together. So now that I've pretty much colored in all of that tent, I'm going to move on to that wooden sign. I'm using 3 different colors of brown, and this is kind of my go-to brown color combination when it comes to Copic markers. I use this for brunette hair when I'm coloring a person. I also use it for wood, like in this case, and I just find these are the most forgiving, warm brown tones, and they blend beautifully. So I really like to use those 3 colors. I then took my scissors and trimmed out that tent piece, and I cut away that inner triangle area because that's where I'm going to have the 2 critters. And this is when I realized that they were spaced out too far apart. They really weren't going to fit. So I knew I would have to do a little bit of masking. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp those 2 critters once more, and this time I'm going to stamp the beaver onto some masking paper as well. I'm going to stamp that down and give myself a good mask. The ink I'm using today for all of the black stamping is from Simon Says Stamp. This is their intense black ink, and it's formulated to work with alcohol markers. So this is an ink that is Copic friendly, and it's great for stamping and then coloring with Copics. So I'm covering up that beaver with a paper mask, and then I can stamp that raccoon closer to the beaver, and they'll overlap. But once I remove the masking paper, then it will look like that raccoon is behind the beaver. So it'll give it a little bit more depth, and I'll be able to get their cute faces inside the door of that tent. So I've got both of those stamped on there, and I'm going to kind of draw in that hexagon shape again. And you'll notice that I've changed the hexagon shape. I've rotated up just one of those sides so that it now has the pointy sides at the top and bottom. And that's because in my original card design, you may have noticed in that sketch, I had that wooden sign coming up from the kind of outside that hexagon window. and I realized that the spacing was all off and it would actually cover up my critters if I used it that way. So I had to turn that hexagon shape so that there'd be a little more space down below the critters so that I could have that sign off to the side. This will make more sense once I start putting everything together and you see where the sign goes. But because of that, I did have to rotate my card. So I originally planned to have the card be a tall card or a portrait card with a fold at the top, but I had to change it to a landscape card, which turned out to be a great decision in the long run anyway. But that is how like my card idea morphed in the middle of it. So I'm coloring in these two little critters. I'm making sure that there's shadows coming down on their faces from where the tent flaps will be. So the outer corners of them, I wanted to have shaded a little bit more. And then because the tent's going to go over the top, I need to kind of color in the area behind them so it looks like the interior of the tent. I'm going to use the darkest olive green color to really make it look like a deep cavernous tent, that they have lots of room in there. So I'm just filling all of that area in with the darkest green color that I've been using. So I'm going to do one more little test run to make sure that that camping tent is spaced perfectly or everything's working well over the top of these two critters. And then I'm going to do a little bit of stamping right below the critters. I want it to look like there's some grass or a little bit of dirt right in front of them. So I'm taking two little images. There's one image in the stamp set. I just stamped it twice. And I will color that in with some green. And then I'm also going to bring in some brown to fill in those areas so it looks like dirt right in front of the tent. And I'm going to use a couple different colors of brown here. I'm using more of a ashy brown now. It's not quite as a warm brown that I've used on the beaver. And this is going to give it a little bit of color contrast. I'm going to bring in a darker shade that would be right in front of that tent, as if the moon is behind the tent and it's casting that shadow down in front. So I'm going to just intensify that area so it looks a little bit more like a shadow. And then I'm going to protect this area of the dirt and grass while I work on the nighttime sky. And this is one of my favorite ways to do a nighttime sky. I'm going to do some distress ink blending. It's going to give me a really pretty color palette for my nighttime sky. So I'm going to use a piece of white Post-it tape just to protect that area down at the bottom. And then I'm going to go right into the ink blending. I'm using 4 different colors of distress ink. The first color I'm using is Antique Linen, and I'm just blending that up from the bottom. I'm avoiding the area of the critters' faces just so that the color doesn't change too much on top of them. And the next color I used was Tattered Rose, and this is going to give it a nice warm shade as it transitions into the other colors in the nighttime sky. So then I used Seedless Preserves and then finished off the ink blending with Chipped Sapphire. Chipped Sapphire sometimes to me looks like a dark blue, and then in the other cases like this, when it blends into Seedless Preserves, it looks like more of an intense blue purple. I just really love Chipped Sapphire. It might be one of my most favorite distress ink colors because it just works so amazingly. I'm going to peel off that masking tape, and then you can see how that nighttime sky meets the ground. And then I'm going to start assembling things. So I'm just getting that spacing of that die cut window just right. And I'll go ahead and trace the inside of that window once again with a pencil. This is going to give me some guidance on how I need to cut that colored piece that I'm going to put underneath. So I just gave myself a little bit of a margin outside that pencil line that I drew. And then I'm going to start assembling the card. The first thing I did with the tent before I adhered it to the card is I went around the edges with a black brush tip marker. And that's just going to finish off those edges. And if I've had any imperfections when I was cutting it out and fussy cutting, having that edge colored completely black is going to kind of hide those. So I always really like to do that when I'm fussy cutting out images right up against the line of the image. Put some foam tape on top of that hexagon shape and then lined up that window over the top. I also cut some smaller foam tape pieces for the tent and placed that over the top of my critters. So I'm almost done with that scene there. I'm going to go ahead and create my card base so that I can adhere it down onto the card, and then I can start adding detail. So I'm using some Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is the 110 pound version this time, so it's a little bit thicker. This is the cardstock I like to use for card bases since it is substantial and very thick. So I added some foam adhesive around that hexagon shape on the back, and then I put regular adhesive on the back of the colored piece because that is going to go flush down with the card front. So now that I have my card assembled, I'm going to start adding detail. I'm going to draw in the eyes of the raccoon since they kind of got lost when I colored in the dark gray. So I'll first add those eyes, and then I'm going to add a bunch of stars twinkling up in this nighttime sky. This is almost like a right after the sun has set, the sky is still a little bit pinkish purple, and then you have those really early stars in the sky. I think it's fantastic. I love that, the look of the sky like that. So I cut out that missing you sign, and I also went around the edges with a black marker, and then I adhered that with some foam tape. I'm going to use that same grass stamp that I used on the scene inside the hexagon to kind of frame that wooden sign and give it a little bit of ground. It needed something to kind of stick to, I guess you'd say, somewhere for it to live, so it didn't look like it was just floating there. I then decided to add a crescent moon to this scene, so I stamped that crescent moon stamp and then used a pale yellow marker, a Copic marker, to color that in. Put some foam tape on the back. I also cut it out and went around those edges with a black marker like I did for the other pieces, and then put that in place. At this point, it was really bugging me that the ground wasn't even darker below these critters, so I came in with an E49 and really intensified that color underneath the tent. So that's the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. This card and video is part of a blog hop for Pretty Pink Posh. So if you would like a chance to win some giveaway prizes, head over to my blog and you'll see the details over there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.